Today's guest on a Life and a Living podcast is Eric Karpinski. Now, Eric, background as a scientist, but through that, we then worked in management consultancy, and then also got interested in the whole area of positive psychology, and has dedicated the last number of years working in that space. And he's very successful in that space, both as a consultant and a speaker. He's just about to publish. By the time this podcast gets published, it will in fact be the day after the publication of his new book, Put Happiness to Work. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. But Eric has worked with some great clients, the likes of Intel, IBM, Facebook, many others, Eli Lilly. Great list of companies. And his book has got endorsements from some phenomenal people, like Adam Grant, like Daniel Pink, like Gene Greaves. So really first-class book. And it digs into the psychology and the study. So it's deeply rooted in science about how we need to kind of raise the happiness level in organizations, not just for its own sake, but for the sake of the individuals themselves, but also for the sake of the organizations that they work for. So lots of great tips, and it's good information and good strategies that Eric is sharing with us about how to actually go about that, how to actually deal with some employees that are maybe challenging in that space in terms of getting them engaged and keeping them engaged. So I really do suggest that you listen to it. I also suggest that you go and buy the book, because it is not only a really interesting and fascinating book, but I think it also serves very much as a playbook. So sit back and listen to the very interesting, very committed and energetic Eric Karpinski. Eric, thank you for joining me today on A Life and a Living. It's a real joy and honor to have you on the show.
Hey, really glad to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great. This would be fantastic. Just to put a bit of context, maybe you might give people just a kind of a quick run through your career and how you got to doing what you're doing, because we're going to focus a lot on the book that you just published, Put Happiness to Work, but just maybe give a little bit of context to that.
Sure. Yeah. So my early career was really marked by a drive for happiness, but through success, right? And I became more successful than I ever expected. I have a couple Ivy League degrees. I was able to land jobs, very sought after jobs in management consulting and venture capital. Was making lots of money, but then I sort of took a second to take a breath and step back. And I realized that even though I was more successful than I ever expected, I was not happy. That constant drive for the next promotion and for the next deal and for the next thing just created all this stress that created anxiety that started affecting my sleep. And that insomnia kind of led to depression. And so while I was on this path of success to try to be happier, I ended up in completely the opposite place and was seeing psychologists and taking, depression medications and things. And so when I was in there, I was like, all right, well, I was trained as a scientist. So what is it that the research says about happiness? And I discovered this whole field of research called positive psychology. And this is 12 years ago. So it was still pretty new to the world. And positive psychology, and of course, neuroscience affects that, organizational behavior, psychology, really important in those fields. And what I discovered was incredible. Like, we know so much about our positive emotions and our happiness and just how to manage it, how to work with our emotions in general, that I decided I wanted to change, and that I actually wanted to spend my career getting this information out to people and getting this information out to organizations. And so I essentially spent the last 12 years working in the trenches with management teams, with leadership, to try to shift the culture, to try to change and bring more happiness. And fortunately, there's a lot of overlap between happiness and certain kinds of happiness and engagement. And so when 3 years ago, I was seeing that the decade I'd worked in the space said, there is a lot of really cool stuff here. Let me see if I can package it. Like, we've got all this big research, right? That's out there, and you can kind of apply it, but you got to really dig kind of deep. so so I spent a decade, how do we make it practical? How do we bring it to the practical? And so I wanted this book to do two things. One was for anyone that wanted to be happier at work and wanted to help their colleagues and workmates be happy. This book, 80% of this book is for them. And then the other 20% is really focused on how, as leaders, we utilize happiness. We help our people be happier because A, it's a good thing to do, but B, because we know that happiness and certain types of happiness overlap with work engagement in a really positive and synergistic way.
And when you talk about, I mean, you know, you're kind of preaching to the converted here in terms of what but for a lot of people, when they hear the word, you know, positive psychology, they're kind of, oh yeah, they're dismissive of it. Oh, it's kind of all about this kind of this rubbish about the secret and just imagine it and then it'll all happen. What's your response to that?
Well, I really want them to focus more on the psychology aspect of that word and the fact that all the things that we're talking about are neuroscience oriented. They're things with hard science, not wishful thinking. There's a place for, hey, let's envision what we want our lives to be like and let's figure out how to go there. But everything that I talk about is anchored in peer-reviewed research. So we need to really think about the science. It's my training. It's what I'm comfortable with. So it's got to have peer-reviewed research that talks about it before I'm going to bring it into the book. And then, of course, you know, once you start practicing these things, you see different ways and different angles on it. But you got to start with, for me, you got to start with the research. And just having a positive attitude has been shown over and over to not be enough. We need to figure out what are the things that we do. What are the actions we can take? What are the habits we can integrate into our lives that are proven to work? And that's really, for me, that's an important distinction, is having the base in the research.
You're very open about the fact as well, Eric, that, you know, kind of paradoxically, when you actually started to study it, you say that, you know, in the year after you started, you know, training in it and teaching it, that, you know, it kind of had the opposite effect of what you might think. And you went through a reasonably intense period of anxiety. So,
yeah, there was.
How do you explain that? And also, that must have been a surprise.
Wasn't, you know, can you imagine? I just like throw away this old career and I'm doing this new thing. And I think, because this is going to be my purpose and my meaning, it's going to be so amazing. And then I continue to have these problems and anxiety and things. Here was the problem. I took the naive view, because I focused on all the good things that can help us be positive and help us feel positive emotions. I'll never have to feel sad again. I've got all these great tools. That's not the way it works. And it's not what the research says. We need negative emotions. If we're going to live in this life, if we're going to live in this world, if we're going to love, if we're going to try to do important things, we're going to be stressed sometimes. We're going to be sad sometimes. We're going to be frustrated sometimes. And one of the biggest problems is when we try to suppress that in a pursuit of being happy all the time, we hurt ourselves, and it hurts our ability to feel any happiness. If we're constantly suppressing, there's this thing, emotional leakage, which is when you kind of suppress these negative emotions and then they pop out. You know, you yell and scream at somebody, or you just start crying for no reason. I've got a whole strategy here about managing negative emotions, and that you need to decide which emotions are necessary and essential and let them in, experience them, understand them. There's a lot of really good information in our negative emotions and in our stress. So we need to give ourselves the freedom to actually feel those things, understand them, and then we can move back to the more positive oriented strategy.
And it's about dealing with them and recognizing them, isn't it? Rather than thinking that if I'm feeling bad, there's something wrong, or I'm not doing it right. And realizing that. Can I come back to your book, you know, Put Happiness to Work? I mean, first I'd have to say, I would love to have got some of the testimonials that you've got. I mean, to have the likes of, you know, Adam Grant, Daniel Pink, Gene Greaves, you know, I mean, boy, they are big named others, but they are really big names to do it. So, you know, I mean, that must have been a great sense of satisfaction to you that they read it and they could speak so highly of it. But can I go into one of the things you talk about in the book is engagement, right? Yeah. And we all talk. I mean, everyone talks and have been talking for a long time positively about engagement, and we need more engagement. But Gallup surveys show year after year that we've actually, you know, we've done damn little in terms of progressing it. It's still at a kind of pathetically low level, you know, and that's not that's globally. And strangely enough, some when you see some of the anomalies, but when you look at the global figure, it is. Why do you think that is? Because if we think it's such a great idea, you know, why don't we actually do something about it and do it right?
Exactly. Well, here's the challenge: is that when leaders talk about engagement, they love to talk about the benefits to the organization. Look, we're going to have more productive people. We're going to be more profitable. We're going to have better customer service. Or they talk about, as managers, they're like, oh yeah, that's going to be great. My teams are going to be loyal. They're going to be committed. They're going to be willing to put in discretionary effort and go the extra mile. Yeah, well, anyone that hears people talking about engagement that way, it sounds a lot like we want you to work harder and we're not going to really do anything else for you, right? We're not going to do anything different. We just want you to work harder. That's what it sounds like to so many people. And here's the thing, people don't care about their engagement, but they do care deeply about their happiness. And if you look at what people feel when they're engaged, they feel enthusiastic. They feel inspired. They feel proud of the work they're doing. They feel like they connected and they belong on the team, and a team that's doing work that matters. Those are positive emotions. Those are what I call activated happiness. So if we can change how we think about engagement, not as, hey, there's these great things, if we can just get our people engaged, we'll get all these great stuff. And instead, consider it that this is really a way of measuring certain types of happiness. And that if we can position the strategies and the ways that we want to increase engagement, not as because we want you to get more out of you, but instead because we want to give more to you, right? If we can focus on helping and really have engagement be those feelings of activated positive emotions that I talked about earlier, that happiness. Now we've got everybody pulling in the same direction. Individual contributors are being like, hey, this is going to help me be happier more of the time. Sign me up, I'm in. And of course, as leaders, we're like, well, if we get those kinds of happiness being felt, that becomes engagement. And then we get all these things we've been talking about for 15 years about the benefits of engagement.
Just curious when you're talking there, and just a question was going around to my head was, which come first, happiness or engagement?
Because there's so much overlap, if you're feeling those activated positive emotions, they're happening simultaneously, right? And so from an organization perspective, we need to focus first on helping people feel those emotions. And that's what the 7 strategies in the book are all about. What are specific things we can do, certain activities, certain habits we can form individually or one-on-ones or group habits that will help us create space for these positive emotions. And then that really drives. That really drives.
So theoretically, can I be happy and not engaged, or can I be engaged and not happy?
Yes. Well, there's a certain subset of lower activated positive emotions. There's lots of people that feel content or satisfied, right? I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah, my life is good. My job is good. But those aren't feelings of motivation. There's not energy to them. It's called a rest and digest kind of positive emotions.
Right.
Hey, yeah, my life is pretty good. Yeah, no, I'll do the things that you need me to do, but I'm not going to jump ahead and like anticipate what else I could do and like do more. It's like, all right, no, things are good. I don't need to rock the boat. I don't need to change anything. So those are the types of positive emotions that feel good, and we want them, and we want them for our people, but they're not the ones that are going to overlap with engagement.
Okay. I mean, you're publishing the book at a very interesting time, to say the least. Here we are in the midst, a year down the road with COVID, and I'm assuming that you started to write it pre-COVID, and I'm just curious, did the experience, or as you went through COVID, did that change anything in terms of what you wrote or what you focused in on or what you kind of leaned into?
Yeah, I think there's 2 really important aspects of that answer. First, obviously the remote work change and how many people are suddenly working from home and have been for most of a year. We wanted to incorporate that. And that was, my first manuscript was due in June. So I had several months where I could be totally focused because of course my traveling speaking job all went away. So I had the time to really focus on how do we integrate that. I mean, remote work's always been an important thing. So it was part of the book to begin with, but it really became a more central figure. It's not the how to be happy during COVID book, because all of these tools are evergreen in that way. But I think that what the pandemic has done is given us a really good sense of we need to know how to do this better. And so many people are suffering so much. There's a recent HBR, Harvard Business Review article that talks about 85% of people have had their well-being decline during this pandemic.
Yeah. That's scary, isn't it? I mean, that is scary when you think of it, isn't it?
So much reduction. And part of the problem is we keep thinking we're just 2 months away from getting back to some normal, right? There's this constant, oh, well, yeah, but this is going to go away, and then the infections are going to go down, and then we'll be able to get back to, we've been doing that for a year. And so what it means is nobody's being proactive. So if there's anything I can say, people are suffering, the mental health of our people are hurting. So many people are feeling lonely and isolated. We need to do something, and we need to do it now. We can't wait around for the vaccines to take hold. And there's this constant wait. Let's do it later. Let's not focus on happiness and engagement and all these things now, because we're too busy and we're too crazy. Well, this is so important to do. And I think there's a couple of specific areas that I think really need to be addressed. And one is the loneliness, right? When so many of us are working from home, we're stressed and we're lonely. We're giving up so many of our communities and so many of our normal things that feed us from a social connection and belonging perspective. And of course at work, it's one of the few places that we're still interacting with people. Maybe it's on Zoom or maybe it's just on phone calls, but I highly recommend people do some things to help people feel more connected, less isolated. Some specific things, because social connection is the #1 driver of happiness, and it's hugely important with our engagement. So if just simple things that we can do at the start of a meeting, just start with a little icebreaker question and go around and ask, what's a new hobby someone's picked up since COVID? What's something they're looking forward to once COVID is done? What's something nice that someone has done for them, right? I've got lists of these quick questions. Boom, boom, boom. Just go around. People start to learn. And if you've got a little more time, Scott Crabtree, who's a happiness speaker and up in the Northwest, has this exercise he calls the Pecha Kucha presentation. Okay, doesn't matter what the name is, but what it means is have everyone on your team put together a slide deck that just has 10 photos of their life, of their personal life, of things that they're willing to share, of course, but 10 photos of activities they like to do, of communities that are important. And this is a pre-COVID kind of thing. Not just 10 things that you do now, but what are things that are important in your life some of which you might go back to. And the key is then at each meeting for the next couple months, have each person just take a couple minutes at the beginning. And the important thing is you only get 10 seconds per slide, right? So you can put up your slides, just tell a little story. Oh, this is my dog, Ralph, and I've had him since this, and this is why he's important to me. This is me beekeeping. I keep bees, and this is something else. So just little things that are gonna connect you with other people who didn't know these things. And you just spend 2 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Everybody hears it. It's not sharing whole stories. It's just planting seeds of connection and potential overlap. But then people can take outside of that and reach out later and say, hey, I heard you were a beekeeper. I've been thinking about being a beekeeper. Can we talk about that? And those are the kind of social connections and ways of making a team tighter.
One of the things you talk about in the book, you mentioned there are 2 types of employees where the strategies can be most effective. I mean, maybe just explain what you mean by that and how best to approach them.
Yeah, I think so there's 2. One is, you mentioned Gallup earlier. And one of the groups is those that are just simply not engaged. They're not feeling activated emotions. And some of them are feeling, non-activated negative emotions. They're just kind of bored, or they're just kind of apathetic, And then there's those that we talked about a second ago. Those are feeling reasonably good about their lives. They're content, they're satisfied, but they're not action oriented. They're not energized at all. They're just like, okay. So with that group, 5 of the strategies in the book are all about how do we increase the amount of positive emotions we feel? How do we create those activated positive emotions so we move these people to that engaged level? Things that'll help us feel more connected. Those that'll help us feel like our work matters. Those things that understanding our strengths and what are the things that energize us? What are the activities that energize us when we do them? How do we do more of that? And I think then one that's ignored by so many organizations is finding meaning in the work we do. How do we think beyond ourselves and our immediate team? What is the work we're doing? How does it help others? How does it help people? How does it help the world? And it doesn't have to be, you know, curing cancer kind of things, but just how are some people's lives made better because of the work that we do? And then how do we remind ourselves of that? So those are some of the top strategies that just help us feel more activated emotions. Then the other,
you've got a huge. Oh, sorry, the second group. Sorry, I should let you finish.
So first of all, that first group is 50% of American workers and something like 67% globally are just not engaged. They're showing up at work, they're doing the things they need to do, but they're not feeling activated, they're not moving forward. The second group is the group I call the overwhelmed. These people have lots of activated emotions, but they're all stress and negative emotions, the anger and the frustration or the really strong disappointment. There's two other strategies in the book that really are about addressing that. Not only should we work on some of the positive oriented ones that will help us get a base of resources and a base of happiness to work from, but also how do we utilize the stress and the negative emotions that are there and the energy that's in them to actually move towards the goals that we set for ourselves, rather than what happens so often with stress and with negative emotions. We spend so much energy trying to push them away or ignore them or distract ourselves from them. And there's so much energy in stress and in those negative emotions, so much information that if we can just open to them, and that's what those two strategies are about, is how do we selectively open to them at the appropriate times, let them in, and figure out how to leverage the energy that's endemic to that.
Yeah. I mean, you in the book, you do give a huge amount of tools that people can adopt and can utilize. Maybe could you just maybe talk about, you know, 2 or 3 of those, just so people give a taster of what the sort of tools that you're talking about?
Sure. And I, you know, you say that there's so many tools, and there are, right? We've got 20 years of positive psychology and neuroscience research in this field. And so the important part is you don't have to do it all. You don't have to take everything, right? I think to think of it as an action buffet, right? You've got this huge buffet laid out in front of you, tons of different dishes that you can try, things that you can eat. When you're reading through them, what are the ones that intrigue you? What are the ones that sound really fun to you? What are the ones that you think are going to fit with the quirky personalities of your team? Try those first. Take a couple of little helpings, try it out, see if it works or not. Now, it's important that you don't just try something once and then walk away from it, right? We're talking about changing social scripts and changing how we do things. People don't like to change, so give it a couple tries. Tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it. Try it a few times. If it doesn't work, no problem. Go back to the buffet. Pick something else from a different strategy, pick something else, a different idea from that same strategy. Second, if it does work and it's like, oh, this is cool, now dig in deeper. And I think it's really important. Almost all of the tools I like to talk about are in the form of habits, either personal habits that we can do for ourselves in our own time, or one-on-one habits, or things that we can do in a group setting. Because we can't leave happiness for, oh, we're going to do a picnic in the summer and we've got a happy hour, you know, a Friday happy hour every week. Those are great. There's nothing wrong with them. But we need to find ways to integrate these little changes into our workday so that we're planting seeds throughout the day that might sprout into these positive emotions. Because we can't ever force happiness. All we can do is plant seeds and water them and hope that they bloom.
Yeah.
So
I mean, sorry, go on.
I was going to go into some details, but some specifics.
But one of the strategies, one of your 7 strategies that you outline in the book is to approach as a coach, right? And for a lot of the reason, well, I mean, obviously it kind of attracted me because of my own background, but one of the challenges for managers are really being challenged in the current climate, right?
Absolutely.
And it really is testing many of them because they're working in a new environment. You know, I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier on today, and they're actually hiring somebody new that's not going to meet anybody that they would traditionally meet and kind of greet in the cafeteria and the office and at the proverbial water cooler and all of that. So when you talk about kind of approach as a coach, how do you suggest that managers do that?
Yeah, well, I think coaching, as you know, John, it's a different mindset than managing. Right?
Yes.
Managing just by you're kind of controlling the way things are, whereas coaching, you clearly have goals that you want them to reach, but there's a lot more autonomy, there's a lot more freedom, and a lot more advice and connecting to resources than it is, here's how to do it, right? The manager tends to say, hey, I was here before, I know exactly what to do, you should do it this way. And they're much more controlling. Of course, we know from all the autonomy research, from Daniel Penkin, from others, that's not an effective way to get people motivated and engaged. It's a good way to, sometimes a good way to get things done quickly and when you need to. And if everything is in a very repetitive way, okay, maybe there's ways to do that. But in today's knowledge economy and the way the environment that work works is we need them to be self-starter and motivated. And by coaching, by providing access to resources, by stating the goals really clearly and showing the resources that are there, but letting them try and fail and check in with you, or try and fail and then link them to someone else. There's some great research about how we can way overcoach. If we spend too much time checking in and looking, then it becomes micromanaging rather than coaching. So I think there's a lot in the chapter that says, here's how we can step back from that micromanager world, give them the freedom to try things out and coach them along the way instead of telling them the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the content. I mean, the content is superb. I mean, it really and truly is. And I think that, you know, obviously that you can see the depth of work and the depth of the years of study and everything else that has gone into it. So, I mean, I think it's a great book. It's a great handbook for people. And I think in the you know, I mean, I think your timing, you know, is extraordinary in the sense that, you know, the book was always going to be needed, but I think it's probably needed even more right now, because I think that not only is well researched, but as I said, I think it's a great how-to book because it gives you the tools to actually go and do that. So it doubles as a playbook in that sense, to my mind. So, you know, I'm thrilled that when we could have gone on a lot longer, and I'm sorry I've taken up more of your time than I said I would, but it's been a really fascinating conversation. Before we wrap up and tell people where they can go to get contact about you and also about the book, two questions that I ask everyone. I'm always fascinated, particularly asking authors this. A book that that you have read, whether it's recent or in the distant past, that has had an impact upon you. What book is that and what's the impact?
Yeah, so Adam Grant's new book is called Think Again. And it is also a hugely important thing for our time in that it really helps. What it helps you do is realize when you're locked into old beliefs and opinions and not checking in, not being a scientist with yourself about why do I believe that? Why am I spouting that when what's really backing it? And so it gives us tools first for ourselves. How do we ask and challenge ourselves and those beliefs and make sure that we're not getting locked and loaded in something that doesn't make sense anymore? Mm-hmm. And second, really powerful tools about how do we engage others who believe different things than we do? How do we have a conversation? Obviously, that's essential to work. So many of us have different opinions about how to do things. We need to be open to different ways, but it also has important ramifications in our political systems and in all of the shutting everything down that doesn't agree with me is not a healthy way for us to make the best way forward. So Think Again by Adam Grant. It's a really wonderful book.
Well, I'm delighted you said that because I haven't read it, but I've just got it and it's on my shelf to read because somebody had recommended it to me very recently, and I just ordered it. It got delivered. I added to the pile of books that I have there that I've got to get through, but I certainly will get to. Second question that was fascinating to ask successful people is their daily rituals. what daily rituals you have, what they do for you, and if you're happy to share them.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, exercise and meditation have both been anchors for me for a lot of years. There's so much power in them. But what I'd like to do is actually talk about a different type of meditation. One I talk about in the book, it's what I call a connection meditation. And it's based on an ancient meditation style called loving kindness meditation. And what you do is you simply spend some time you think of someone who you love a lot. That's really easy to love. So sometimes our partners aren't the right choice because we might have some conflict with them. So maybe it's a niece or a nephew that you just have nothing but love for, or someone a benefactor that's done really good things for you. And you bring them to mind and you send them good wishes. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. Whatever, and you can use whatever like lines that are most effective to you that don't get you caught up in your head about why you're doing it. And you just send these thoughts and it creates this sense of love and this connection. And then you move it. You focus on someone maybe who's close to you, but sometimes conflicted. Send them that same love. And you've juiced it up with these first, and then you can go to people that you don't know that well, or colleagues or coworkers, and maybe even some people even then take it to people that are their nemesis, right? Or the people that they dislike the most. But the idea is we're generating that love and that connection, and then we're sending it to new people. And we're sending it to people we don't know that well, or people we're having some challenges with. And what it does, the research out of Stanford and out of UNC talks about how it really opens us to, it increases our empathy. It increases our positive emotions, right? We have this sense of love, but it increases all of our positive emotions. And so what's really powerful is that increase in empathy then helps us reach out more. It helps us connect with other people. And so it's one that I recommend highly for any leader who wants to connect better with their people, is let's go through this simple exercise. You do it for 5 minutes a day, or you can intermix it with your mindfulness meditation. And
I haven't come across that before.
Yeah, loving kindness meditation is the historic, and it hasn't been used in a work context because loving kindness just doesn't sound like a work thing historically.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we're going to a place more so, but I call it a connection meditation, and that takes some of that, well, that's not, I can't love people at work. That's
yeah.
And one of the other things is it's a lot easier to stick with than mindfulness meditation. So if you're just starting a meditation practice, try this one out, mix it in, maybe do it regularly, because it helps people feel so good when they're doing it that it tends to, after a while. Sometimes people when they first started, it kind of puts up resistance, and it kind of makes them stick with it for a week, 2 weeks, try it out. It really is powerful.
Well, I love coming across new ideas and new thoughts, because I am fascinated by rituals. Yeah. I'm a great believer in them, and because I think that they just kind of set your day up to be a success. You can't just kind of suddenly just turn up, and I think that they're powerful. So that's a new one. So that's a great one to get, Eric. Before we wrap up, Eric, where can people get in touch with you? Presumably they can buy the book Put Happiness to Work in Amazon and all similar places, but maybe you can share.
Yeah, so the website about the book is at puthappiness-to-work.com. Really straightforward. It's just the title of the book.com. And erickarpinski.com is my primary website. But the book website that'll link you easily to whichever retailer you like to buy books from.
Well, Eric, it's a great book. I wish you continued success with it. I know it'll be a huge bestseller when it launches in the next couple of weeks. And I really want to thank you for joining me today. It's been a huge honor and a huge pleasure to have you here. Thank you, John. It was really, obviously you can tell how excited I get talking about this. So appreciate you harnessing that energy as we went from topic to topic about the book. Well, it was a joy. I can tell you that. Thanks, Eric. Talk soon. All right. Talk to you. Thank you.